Okay. Today's session on reflective practice as workforce retention, supporting the people who do the work, will explore how reflective supervision and consultation support emotional safety, professional growth, and long-term engagement in infant and early childhood work. Today's session will highlight the competencies of contemplation, self-awareness, and curiosity. And I'm really excited to welcome Denise McDrummond. She is our presenter today. She is the Executive Director of the Missouri Association for the Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health. And Denise brings more than 20 years experience in early childhood education, infant mental health, and focus on reflective practice, relationship-based approaches, and supporting the early childhood workforce. She has also been an amazing mentor for me as I've taken on the role of endorsement coordinator with Emerly, Idaho, starting in July. So thank you all for being here and the work that you do every day. And at this time, I'm excited to turn this over to Denise. Denise, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. And can I share my screen? I believe I can. Yeah. And before I get started, I will say on all the what made you happy today. So our 2-year-old grandson, he's quite amazing. He just is. But he's so funny. He's just crazy. My daughter texted earlier and said that she was asking him what he wanted for lunch today because it was almost nap time, so they needed to go ahead and get that started. And she said, "Do you want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Do you want a ham sandwich? What would you like?" He said, "No, a salad. A salad would make me happy." So, out of the mouths of a 2-year-old, they say things, and things like that do make us happy. Not salad, mind you. Never salad. The chocolate croissants, though, that can make me happy. But I'll take that 2-year-old thought on what makes happy. So, but thank you for allowing me to be here today and join you in this time. And like Kim said, we're going to be looking at reflective practice as workforce retention, because research shows that when people are receiving and practicing reflective practice, that it does help them. It reduces burnout. It helps to help them feel more supported. So we're going to kind of take a look at that. And again, thank you for allowing me to join you. So for the heart of today's work, we're really just going to look at how reflective practice supports workforce retention and well-being. Look at the differences, because there is differences between types of reflective supervision, administrative supervision, clinical approaches. And I think it's important that you know the difference as you look to see what you are receiving or what you would like to receive. And of course, really looking at ways to integrate reflection into your setting, the work that you do. So what is infant and early childhood mental health? So we know the 0 to 3 definition is that it is the developing capacity of a child from birth to around age 5 to do those 3 big things, to form close and secure adult and peer relationships, to really understand emotions and how to manage them and how to express them in ways that are healthy and appropriate, and to get out and explore and learn, right? So really what infant and early childhood mental health, it refers to the well-being of infants and toddlers and young children. It's built on the premise that babies exist in the context of the caregiving relationships. There's a saying throughout the infant and early childhood mental health world that there is no such thing as a baby. I don't like that saying, but I get it, because a baby can't exist on its own, right? It only can exist in this world in the context of caregiving in that relationship. So being able to know that, and that is what this world is built on, this field is built on the premise that they can only exist in the context of that relationship, and that the experiences of that a person experiences during pregnancy in those first few years are laying the foundation for all future development, right? And all of these things are things that we are very aware of, that we already understand. But I do like to highlight and make sure that that is the common ground that we're starting on. And those key concepts for infant and early childhood mental health, really that it is a period of rapid growth and change. That, again, all future development is built on this. Babies are born ready to relate, ready to communicate, to learn. And of course, development occurs in the context of those relationships because that's where they're going to learn, that's where they're going to grow. Healthy development, the focus is on healthy social and emotional growth rather than on psychopathology. So we're not diagnosing babies. We're not really looking and creating, well, again, the diagnosis for them. We're looking at those relationships. In this context of infant and early childhood mental health, the relationship is the client. So, and that culture and community, in addition to those relationships, are going to be where that development takes place. Because we know that children are going to learn in the context of culture and community, right? So those are the key concepts, but that one right above culture and community, that reflective capacity, is a key concept of infant and early childhood mental health. How you are is as important as what you do. Of course, that's one of the favorite quotes throughout this field, and we're going to kind of look at that again in a minute. So why do people stay? I'm curious as to what you guys think. Why do people stay? Because there have been times in work, in the roles that you have, that you felt like you could keep going, that, okay, I've got this, I can do this. It's hard, but I can do this. So what made it possible for you to say that? What made it possible for you to feel like you can do this, that you can keep going? And really small groups, so you can just pop off of mute and give me something, or you can put it in chat if you would rather. But I'm curious, why do you stay? Why do you stay in the job that you have?
I think for me, uh, I always say it's like running in the trenches. I feel like I've had a lot of experiences that I also assist people with. So it's like getting that, that individual education and then relaying that. But I
Mhm.
just always hope to make someone else's life a little bit easier. And
Yeah,
so knowing that is potentially happening makes me feel like, okay, it's all of this is worth it.
right, right. And I think a lot of people, that's a reason that a lot of people come into this field is to do that. That is a goal, I think, for many people. What else? There's somebody come off mute. I can't find my chat, so if anybody does put anything in there, just let me know.
I'm happy to read chat, Denise, if it helps.
Perfect.
So we have a few things that came in chat.
Okay.
Let's see. Knowing that my work was making a difference, even incremental.
Hmm.
Supportive teammates. Caring about the people and programs we work with. The
Yeah.
aha or light bulb moment you see in parents or children after working with them towards a goal. Uh,
Nice.
enjoying seeing families grow.
Nice. So I think we come to this field for very similar reasons. And we find reasons to stay. I think that as we look through and think about those reasons, we came to this field, but why do we stay? Because whether we feel it in ourselves or not, we know that people need us. We know that what we're doing is important and it's important work. It's work that asks a lot of us. This isn't easy work. It is emotionally heavy work at times. Not all the time, and I think that's part of what can sustain us, is that it's not a constant emotional drag on us. It has moments where it's easier, and I think those are the moments that really help to sustain us. But it can be very hard. It can We can experience a lot of secondary trauma because the work that we do puts us right into the trenches of those people that are experiencing trauma. We have to navigate a lot of uncertainty in this field. Could be systemic uncertainty. We don't know if those grants are going to continue coming in. We don't know if our job is going to be funded again. There's a lot of uncertainty for the families and the children that we serve. So it's a lot of not knowing what's going to happen. And then, of course, we have to be the steady ones. We're the ones that continue to show up. We're the ones that continue to uh, fight, to advocate. So the work is it's very emotionally tiring at times. Excuse me. But so it asks a lot of us. So one of the quotes from Jerry Paul, and this is one that I have been looking at quite a bit lately. Excuse me. It is not possible to work on behalf of human beings without having powerful feelings aroused in yourself. Now, that is where a lot of people that share this quote stop. But really, the whole thing needs to be presented because the rest of it, in working with families who are in great difficulty, rage can actually become the most familiar affect. Rage at the system, at a world with too much violence that creates too much helplessness, and also at a family who will not be better or even seem to try. Because this really pulls all of us in. The work that we do, we can't, it's like trying to step in an ocean without getting wet. You can't do it. You can't work with families who struggle and not be affected in some way. And sometimes, yes, that the way that we're affected, it feels like rage. And it is a very normal feeling. It is very much just a feeling. And feelings are okay. It's how we channel those feelings and what we do with them that becomes the important piece of that. But when we work with families, rage can very well be that emotion that is stirred up because we experience rage at systems who don't support our families. We experience rage at families who don't seem to want to do anything unless you're force feeding them, right? Rage at the world in general because of the violence that we experience, community violence, violence in the home. I know, so we were a foster family when we lived in our previous life in Oklahoma. We did foster care for several years, and this is just part of it. This, when you're working with families in various settings, it's just part of it. So knowing that and understanding that because of the roles that we have, we're going to experience big, heavy feelings. And knowing that it's very okay and very normal to have those feelings is important. Because the work that you do, it really comes with a cost. There is an expectation that you can be immersed in suffering and loss. This is the quote that I just was referring to, and not be touched with it. Exactly, it is unrealistic as expecting to walk through water without getting wet, because the work you do is peppered around with all of these heavy feelings. So, and when we're looking at how do you deal with those feelings, one of the, I mean, the same things that make us come to this job are going to cost us deeply. And that's something that we need to be aware of. So when we're looking at reflective capacity and reflection in general, I wanted to share this with you. So this is just kind of, it's a concept, an image that reminds us of, what we see. Of course, we see the waves, we see the beach, we see the horizon beyond, but we see all of that, and that's all very surface. But even below that, there is depth, there's structure, there is support holding everything in place, right? And when we're looking at reflection and reflective capacity, it's very similar to the ocean. When things feel turbulent on the surface, it doesn't mean that the whole system is unstable. And that's reassuring because things do feel very turbulent within our reach a lot of times. But it means that something is moving and that we have to have those supports to help us make sense of it as well. So, and that's where reflective capacity comes in. So if you look at that, reflective capacity refers to that uniquely human ability to make sense of another. So to be able to understand from another person's perspective what they might be feeling or might be seeing their perception of what is happening in this situation. So that is reflective capacity. That is, if you look at the picture, the ocean itself. Okay. The ocean surrounds everything. It's always present, even when we don't notice it. And that's reflective capacity. Reflective capacity is our ability to make sense of ourselves as well as others, to hold those multiple perspectives and still remain open and curious. That is reflective capacity. Reflective practice, the consistent use of strategies to build reflective capacity, right? So that's the waves. Those are the waves. That's what we see. That is reflection in action. Those waves along. It takes a lot of different forms because depending on the moment, it might look like pausing, might look like taking some deep breaths. It could be some self-talk, movement, something that helps you in those moments. Okay, so that is reflective practice is how we use our capacity in real time. So, I put it in different order. So mindful self-regulation, MSR, those are the strategies that we use to remain present in that moment. So again, that might be, in this picture, it's the shoreline. So it's where the waves meet the land. So reflective practice and how it meets us in the moment, right? So again, that breathing, that pausing, that slowing down, strategies that help you to remain present. It might be doing some grounding, really doing some breathing in the moment, some of that 5-finger breathing. Inhale, pause, exhale. Inhale, pause, exhale. Lots of different methods that you can use. Maybe it's visualization. We all have different ways of slowing down and being present in the moment. That's what mindful self-regulation is. So reflective supervision. It is intentional set-aside space where a specified reflective supervisor sits with an individual or groups and intentionally supports them to think through their work, to really understand how they're impacting the work that they do and how the families that they're working with are impacting their work. So looking at how all of these things are tied together. And reflective supervision, in this picture, it's the ocean floor. That is that support. It's that structure, that stability underneath all of this. That's what really holds it all together. It's protected, it's intentional, it helps us to slow down in that space and to explore and make meaning of our experiences. And it holds and sustains the entire system. So that is one of those things I really wanted to share with you. I find this to be incredibly helpful when I'm looking at the different components and how they all work together. So reflective capacity is central to infant and early childhood mental health practice. Because the optimal child development requires that caregivers have reflective capacity. That is in there. It is a goal of infant and early childhood mental health to increase caregiver reflective capacity. And when children have caregivers with reflective capacity, they develop reflective capacity in themselves. Research has shown that when a provider, such as a home visitor, is receiving reflective supervision, that translates down to the parents. So they are gaining reflective capacity in their own right because that home visitor is being held in reflective supervision. So as that home visitor grows capacity, their families grow capacity, and that translates to the child. So it's a systemic practice that supports everything. So what keeps people in the work? And when we're looking at reflective supervision, reflective practice, it builds things like emotional safety because it provides that space. It helps us to grow so that we can see those and hold those multiple perspectives. It allows for professional growth. Again, I'm not learning, or I am learning, I'm not just surviving in the moment, right? It moves us as professionals from that survival mode to that growth mode. It provides connection. I'm not alone. It helps us to feel like we are all in this together. And, resilience. I can keep going. I can do this. It helps us to move between those hard moments. People don't leave a job or a role just because the work is hard. I mean, we all have hard work, right? We stay in these roles. They leave when they feel alone in hard work, when they feel it's all on them and they just can't do it by themselves anymore. So that is one of the things that reflective practice is helping to grow because we don't have to feel alone anymore. So reflective practice is not just about supporting professionals. It's about strengthening the entire system of relationships around children. Because again, when we strengthen those systems around our children, we are supporting not just them, but we're supporting all those relationships that they're connected to. And that includes professionals who are serving them. So reflective practice, slowing down, noticing your own thoughts and feelings, wondering about those thoughts and feelings of others, because that's that reflective capacity, being able to see multiple perspectives, to wonder how that other person might interpret what's happening. That is how we grow, being able to wonder and be curious. Recognizing that others' behaviors are based on their thoughts and feelings, not on anything else, but on their thoughts and feelings. And understanding how our behaviors and our way of being can impact others. Okay, so that is when we're looking at how we interact and how our work impacts us and how we are impacting our work and those that we're working with. So reflective practice builds that emotional safety. Again, that professional growth, that connection, that resilience, because these are the little components that allow us to not, allows us for the work to not feel as heavy. Because again, the work that we do is hard work, it's emotional work, and if we let it, it can be very, very heavy. So reflective supervision, and this is research-based outcomes, so to speak. So it reduces burnout. And you know when you feel burnt out. We know when we start feeling like the work is constantly heavy, when we're starting to feel like we're all alone in the work, when we start to prioritize things that aren't the work, we're leaning towards burnout. Reflective supervision does help to reduce that burnout. It improves child outcomes by strengthening adult capacity. Again, when a provider is receiving reflective supervision, it translates to that family, and then it translates to that child. So by strengthening your capacity as a provider, it will help to retain your families. It helps to engage families more, and they stay in that system longer because their capacity is growing. So it really does improve that child outcome. It supports staff with lived trauma and adversity. Guys, we all have our own past that we deal with. We all have our own stories, and that is only further complicated when we interact and support families who also have stories and have a past. Because not only are you having to hold them with their stories, but you're back here, you're holding your own story. And at some point, this is one of the things that it provides containment. It reduces emotional spillover. Um, when I think, do y'all remember the movie Flubber? I don't know. Um, it always makes me think of that, and I always think of a basket in which Flubber is put, and it stays there with a lid on it until Flubber decides it doesn't want to stay there, and it kind of leaks out through the basket. You know, if you think of a woven basket, it kind of comes out through the little seams and it leaks under that lid. That is just like what we deal with. We can say, okay, you know what? I can't deal with this right now. I'll deal with it later. And we stuck that little feeling into the basket. And we do that over and over because sometimes, when something's not in our face, we don't think about it, right? But then it pops out at the most inconvenient times. And our feelings that we stuck in this basket, and as we're working with these families, and oh my goodness, that family is what they are dealing with. I've dealt with things like that in my own life, and it was just huge. And so all of these feelings that you've stuck in the basket are starting to leak out. Have you ever seen somebody just kind of explode, have a little emotional outburst, explosion of feelings? I have been that person. And I can always feel when I have tucked feelings down and haven't dealt with them. And bless my husband's heart, he gets to be the recipient of a lot of those things. Um, so if we're not dealing with our feelings, then eventually our feelings will deal with us. So when we look at reflective supervision as a way to hold and be the container for feelings, it helps to prevent that spillover into our work, into our personal lives even. So that is one of the bigger things I feel like that reflective supervision does. It also enhances program stability and retention. Again, when a family is held by somebody who is receiving reflective supervision and their capacity is growing, they stay engaged in programs longer, and they are more likely to benefit and see obvious benefit from those programs. But my goodness, they're staying in the program. How many times do you lose families out of programs? How many times do you say, "Wow, this family is just not engaging at all"? Well, maybe you need to be working on your reflection, your reflective capacity as well, because it does translate down. And not all reflective supervision is the same. And this is where I was wanting to talk to you about the different types of reflective supervision. Well, the different types of supervision. I won't say reflective supervision. But because so many times in all the work that we do, we receive a lot of these types of supervision. I think most of us have administrative supervision of some sort. So, and that might look like, you know, talking about all your caseload. It might look at like, have you done these things and checked off all these components of what your role is supposed to do. It's performance based, right? It is, am I doing this right? Clinical supervision. And this is a lot more of our, of course, mental health specialists, LCSWs, those that receive clinical supervision. These are really focused on interventions, diagnoses. You know, what do I do here? What should I do? It really is helping to solve that problem, right? You don't have to really wonder or be curious. We've got the diagnosis. What do we do with that? Reflective supervision is focused on meanings and feelings in relationships. It's exploring and just being curious. What is happening here and how is it impacting me? It doesn't solve a problem. It discusses cases and problems that you may be feeling and finding within your cases, but it's not going to solve a problem. And I think a lot of people come to a space wanting an answer. And that's the hard part. Reflective supervision doesn't provide answers per se, but it does allow exploration of what the problems are and what you could be doing to handle those problems, or what others in might be doing to handle similar problems. So it's not giving an answer, but it really is allowing for that exploration of well, just kind of exploring those issues. So really just understanding the differences between the types of supervision, from task and performance based to really intervention and diagnosis based problem solving, to really just wondering and understanding feelings and meanings behind feelings. So different types of supervision all are important, and every one of these have their place. But when we're looking at reflective supervision, we're really focusing on just how is this impacting me? How am I impacting the work that I'm doing? So, and these are just different, these are the three main components of reflective supervision. Okay, so, and you can see, we're not going to go through all of that, but I just wanted you to see the different pieces of what reflective supervision truly is. So it is looking at and being able to hold that space of wondering, because you're not getting that answer. You can embrace the complexity. You can tolerate ambiguity. Personally, I am not all that good at tolerating ambiguity at times. Sometimes I just need an answer, right? It is a safe place because confidentiality is held at a high regard. What happens in reflective supervision and what's said there stays there, because otherwise nobody's going to feel safe enough to talk about what needs to be talked about. The work focuses on the interactions and the work with children and families. It's not a place that you come to have a gripe session. It's not a place that you come to boss bash. It really is focused on the work. It's a collaborative space. Again, invites communication and curiosity and listening. Because if we don't have that time of being heard, we're not going to be able to share. And it is a regularly scheduled time and place, virtual or in person, group or individual. It's a very held regularly. In fact, I always say you schedule things around reflective supervision. You don't schedule reflective supervision around things. But it is a very regular, routine, collaborative space. Oops, sorry about that one. All right, so this is where that quote came back in with from Jerry Paul. How you are is as important as what you do. Because if you're not okay, then you're not holding those families in a way that is going to work. How you are is impacted by who you are. How you hold and deal with yourself is going to be impacted by who you are. Being very self-aware is a huge component of reflective supervision. Understanding who you are in the work that you do, understanding who you are in your personal world is just as important, because when we understand ourselves, we can look at some of those, we would know if we go into a situation, well, I'm pretty laid back. So if I'm about to enter a tense situation, then I'm okay. But if I am naturally a very anxious person, knowing that I'm walking into a situation that's going to drive anxiety up, um, being aware of that will help me to deal with my own feelings as I'm working through in that situation. But how you are is going to impact the families that you're working with. So it's important. It's important to take care of yourself, to know yourself, and be very aware of who you are. So building those reflective spaces in real life. Let's look at that. It doesn't have to be perfect, first of all. Okay. Starts with small shifts. Starting meetings with a reflective question. Creating spaces for pausing and slowing down. Normalizing the I'm not sure, because, we always want to have an answer. And it's okay, and it needs to be normalized to not always have an answer. And then, of course, using curiosity instead of correction. So when we're looking at taking this into a system and really engaging and bringing reflective practice into that system. So if you work with home visitors and being able to bring this into that particular system, it might be that you really work to normalize not having an answer, that you create a space in your weekly meetings to be reflective, to maybe even have some time to pause, making sure that you take different pieces and different parts of reflective practice and put them into your work practice. It doesn't have to be perfect. For leaders, it might be modeling reflective practice. So again, incorporating time for a reflective question in your meetings. Modeling reflective practice might be showing how you can do some of those breathing techniques to slow down, to be present. Personally, I do breathing techniques. I do breathing on my own. I don't like doing it as a group. I don't know. How many of y'all feel pressured to breathe along with somebody? And then I get anxious when I can't keep the breaths going. So it does nothing for me. It can be hard. There are certain pieces and practices of reflective practice that may not fit for you. And it does, again, it doesn't have to look perfect. Um, I do, I engage in a lot of grounding. So I do take time quite often to just feel how my body is doing and reacting to different types of stress. Um, Noticing that I have stress in my shoulders and taking a moment to hmm, just notice it. I don't have to fix it. I don't have to um, be mad at myself for feeling stressed when, maybe I shouldn't, but just being able to notice it. But as a leader and taking this into your system, modeling that reflective practice is huge and protecting time. So if you are trying to bring reflective practice into your system, protecting that time for people to engage in reflective supervision, protecting, making sure that, again, we're not scheduling reflective supervision around things, but we're scheduling things around it. We have to hold that as kind of sacred time. If we really want to make changes in our systems, we have to make time and protect it. Separate reflective versus administrative spaces whenever possible. I know a lot of programs will combine the two, but that is a very challenging thing to do. It is really hard to combine them and actually provide effective reflective supervision. So whenever possible, separate those spaces, even if it is all done in one setting. Maybe you have an hour and a half set aside for the total time, 30 minutes to be focused on administrative, and then very intentionally saying, okay, now let's set those things aside and let's shift gears. So being very intentional about that. If you can't completely separate them in a time block, then separating them within that block of time. It doesn't require perfection. It requires intention and intentionality. And that is something that if your systems aren't perfect, we know this. And a lot of them have not yet caught up to understanding the importance or the buy-in of reflective practice and reflective supervision. And it requires intentionality. And when our systems haven't caught up, it can be very challenging. But when we're looking at the parallel process within reflection, because again, I impact the families that I serve are impacting me. So in infant and early childhood work, relationships don't exist in isolation. We know this. And the way that support and stress and calmness or connection move through that system mirrors itself from one relationship to the next. That is the parallel process. It's creating that the way it moves, it mirrors itself. And when we're looking at that as a system, so how that leader holds a supervisor is going to be how that supervisor holds a professional, who then is going to very similarly hold a family, who will then hold their child. It trickles down. It is not something that is it's not a standalone. We impact one another in this system. It doesn't just stop. So we cannot expect adults to regulate or to create reflective, regulated relationships for families if they aren't experiencing the same relationships themselves. It's not going to happen. So we have to start within our systems of supporting professionals who can then support families, because we can't expect it to happen otherwise. It's just not going to. So reflective supervision in organizations, and we know from research that reflective practice has an, an experience on the family and the child. We know this. We know that it impacts. Um, when reflective supervision is used by organizations as a whole, then we are working to embody that whole culture of reflection and reflective practice, and it supports really talking about those hard things that occur, because we are human and we do hard things, and hard things occur in the work of this field of public service. So none of us are immune to things like funding cuts, layoffs, or even the need to let people go. And it can be very challenging and very hard. These are realities, and when they're not addressed effectively, they can leave long-lasting impacts on organizational functioning and how we move forward. So when we utilize reflective supervision, we are able to promote curiosity and inquiry, moving from that what happened to how did we get here? Just really being curious about that. We're supporting staff wellness. We're mitigating that vicarious trauma because it's there. We know that it's there. We're slowing down the process of moving from thinking to doing, from promoting adherence to implementation science, and decreasing organizational errors. So when we bring reflective supervision in, we are having a long-lasting impact on our organization as a whole. So we need to consider if it's not in our organization, we need to think about why is it not there? Why are we not already doing this? And how can we do this in the future? Because we do experience that ripple effect. So again, it goes throughout the whole system. When people feel held in mind, they are more able to hold others in mind. So it might seem very small. It might be a thoughtful conversation or even just that 10-minute pause. Somebody feeling listened to. Again, these are small things that can create big changes. We don't have to set out to move the world all at once. We can make changes, but we have to start. I mean, even if it's a small start, even if it is just being curious instead of being judgmental about a situation. But when we do that, we're going to change team culture. We're going to impact staff retention, family engagement. We're going to impact emotional regulation and child outcomes. So it might be something like, a supervisor who responds with curiosity instead of criticism might help a professional feel calmer and more confident. And that professional might then respond more patiently to a parent, right? And that parent may feel less ashamed and more connected to their child because somebody helped them. They were patient with them. So that one reflective interaction can ripple outward in ways that we may never fully see. So let's just pause here for a moment. I know we only have a few minutes left, but I'd like you to really think of a time when one supportive interaction changed the tone of your whole day. I mean, just take a moment and think. Have you had a time when just one positive, supportive interaction changed your whole day? I have. And I think most of us probably have had, I can remember times when I've had really, really hard days. And then, just one word or one, hey, you've got this, you're doing okay, can change your whole outlook and really shift how you are seeing the moment and how you are perceiving the work that you're doing. It matters. One moment, one interaction can make a huge difference. So if we want a workforce that stays and grows and thrives, we have to create spaces where people can think, where they can feel, where they can be human and not feel bad about that, because being human has a lot of things with it, right? Reflective practice isn't an extra that so many times we think about. It is how we sustain the people who sustain others. It's not extra. It is what the whole is. It really has to be there. Now, I know again we are getting close to time, but I wanted to really how endorsement fits in to reflective practice, how it ties together. An endorsement is a way to recognize your knowledge and experience. It grows your work with families, your skills, and how you deal with those families, how you interact. It strengthens reflective practice and it connects you to that community of professionals. And reflective supervision is a key part of all of this growth. Again, when we slow down, when we take that time to be curious, to wonder, we're allowing ourselves as people to grow our reflective capacity, to grow as a professional. And that is where endorsement is supportive. Okay, endorsement recognizes your growth, your understanding. So, and it really is, there's so many different pieces that reflective supervision is best practice for all of us. Anybody who works with children, who works with families, would benefit from reflective supervision. Again, not all of our systems have caught up to that. But we can all engage in reflective practice, whether it's maybe taking that pause or those few minutes. Again, it can look like, joining those reflective spaces or supervision, but it really is just being aware of what you are doing and how you are being. But again, learning more about endorsement, taking those steps towards your professional growth, because it doesn't all end in one place, right? We're always continuing to grow as humans, but we don't want to stop growing as a professional either. But it allows you to stay curious about your work. What could I do differently? How could I handle these situations in a different way that would better support our families? So, there's no one right path. It's just that next step. So, again, if you want to learn more, make sure that that's the QR code to get in touch with AIM Early Idaho. I think many of you already are aware of all this, but I just wanted to leave you with that.